This is the third and final part of my chat with Jim MacCarthy from Counterpoint Strategies. And you better brace yourself because by this stage of the interview, Jim is really getting passionate about some of the clients he works with. And you'll find that he works for clients that is going to divide. Some of you listening now, some of you are going to be, oh, I can't believe he works with them. Some of you are going to be in support of it. And I mean, that's the whole reflection of society, isn't it? And the way that comms is involved in a lot of different things and the way that society is so divided into so many different segments today. So I warn you from the start, be ready for some really plain talking conversation about comms. And I can't thank Jim enough for this because I think it's really important to be able to have these open, honest conversations. So he not only talks about some of the clients he's working with, but some of the strategies he's been using. We talk about the effect of influencers when they turn really against an organization. How can you actually fight back against influencers when there could be hundreds of them? We talk about the position of the media today. Is it declining? Or as Jim argues, it is still the center of gravity for a lot of conversations going on, particularly from the point of view of regulation and government. So it makes some really interesting points on that. As I say, whether you agree with Jim's stance or not, this whole podcast is about a conversation about comms technique. And in that respect alone, I hope you can take a really objective view on listening to Jim and really pull out some really valuable and interesting perspectives, insights, and techniques from it. So one of the problems you've got as well is that we're talking about the narrative as well. And you mentioned using figures and data and clear statements, but
Yeah.
when it comes down to opinion, so if you've got something which isn't just a clear-cut statistic, how can you try and change that narrative when it is just about what one person thinks against another?
Well, I think the nicotine vaping project we're working on right now is a great example. We are up against the full weight of the U.S. federal government, gigantic billion-dollar NGO activist groups, including American Heart, American Lung, American Cancer, the full weight of the American news media, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, AP, Washington Post, are all against us. And of course, FDA, the regulatory agency, is trying to outlaw my clients' products across the board. So the odds could not be stacked worse. And of course, there's messages.
So you've taken on a heck of a cause there in terms of being on the counterpoint. Yeah. But this is quite fascinating from a comms perspective. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, for us, for my shop, we're proud to do it. It's our kind of account. We love to lower the drawbridge and ride out to face those dragons. But there's a public opinion aspect, which is what I want to touch on is, the public is being consistently bombarded with messaging about how vaping is bad for you and dissuading people about the product. And so we're having to combat that. And the way to do that, I think, is what we've been doing is with ordinary voices. The stories, the messages from regular people who have switched from cigarettes to vaping, or their spouses, or their kid, or their doctor, showing how this operates in the real world. We might interview a vape shop owner and ask them to do a short form video of how many people have you saved from cigarettes? What do you think of what the Food and Drug Administration is doing? What was your opinion of the New York Times story bashing vaping? And by
humanizing it, bringing it down to case studies.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And especially confronting the adversaries. It's not just, did you help a customer today? It's, what do you think about the Food and Drug Administration? What do you think about New York Times reporter Christina Jewett and her coverage? You've got to confront the adversary in that conversation. And then when people, again, see that, or ordinary people or commentators or, voices large and small, they can connect, draw their own conclusion, and then that builds the public opinion. And so if you look at the numbers on it, I mean, look on social media, pro vape advocacy has 100x sentiment positivity over anti-vape from even the leading outfits like American Lung and Tobacco Free Kids and Bloomberg Philanthropies. When they put out tweets saying vaping is terrible, they have no supporters. And then when tiny little trade association, American Vapor Manufacturers, puts out a tweet, we have this huge chorus of support. And that's how you tap into that opinion.
This show is all about having a discussion amongst PR people. Now, a lot of people are not going to be in the same position that you're in every day. But there's going to be a lot of people that do have to work with clients that suddenly find themselves in a difficult situation like this. I mean, on a human level, as a comms person, I think one of the common things when you get a situation like this is to panic a bit. Now, most people should have
a crisis
Yeah.
plan in place. But as we also know that a lot of people then forget which drawer it was put in,
Yeah.
because haven't had to use it for a while.
Right.
What's your kind of advice on how to mentally prepare yourself and to react to
Yeah.
these situations when something goes against? What advice would you give to other comms people out there?
I guess one is practical, one is stylistic. On a practical level, build a platform. Keep it dark, make it just a draft, but build a platform, even a little blog inside your website. Build a dark social media feed and begin to dissect articles that you object to. There isn't a PR person alive who, if you ask them the question, is there a journalist you think got something wrong recently, that wouldn't have a lengthy list of examples. Take one of those examples, mock it out, dissect the story. What would you have said if you could say anything? How would you have pointed out across the kitchen table why this story and this narrative is wrong? So get that muscle memory and set up the platform. Have it ready so that when the crisis occurs, you can flip a switch and have that capability. You don't have to start from scratch. Stylistically, I take a very aggressive approach. We lock the door of the pub, turn out the lights, and then we'll see what happens. But not everyone has to do it that way. It doesn't have to be all capital letters and grabbing lapels. You can do it diplomatically. There's much more genteel ways to say it. And of course, each institution has its own culture and its own voice. Use that voice. There's a lot of ways you can say with great gentility and politeness that my gentle friend from the Times of London, I'm afraid, overlooked a few things that I wish that readers would have benefited to know. So there's lots of ways you can say it, and begin to do that in your own voice as you practice. And that way, when you've got the practice down, when the confrontation occurs, you'll be ready for it.
What about that feeling, though, of dread of telling a journalist they're wrong? How do you process that? I mean, we're getting really inside the head here.
Yeah.
How does someone that hasn't ever done that before, maybe they've been working in comms for 20 years, how do they actually process that internally, would you say?
Well, it's a different skill set. That's for sure. But a funny thing happens. We've worked with many different industries in which the internal comms people on day one express that real fear. Their CEO wants to punch back, but they say to us privately, "Gosh, I'm really worried about this. I know these people. I don't want to get in a fight with them. I've never done this before." And so we will walk them through how to do it. We'll show them the first couple of examples, and an amazing thing happens. The coverage gets better, and then once the client sees it work on their issue, on their company, they become even more gung-ho than we are. So we've got like retail brand companies that are now ready to like slap on the face paint and put a knife in their teeth and run out. So it seems daunting if you've never done it before, but give it a shot. It doesn't have to be an all-out fight. Just do a
Correction. A straightforward correction, yeah.
Start with a correction or a letter to the editor or a gentle note saying, you were mistaken. You overlooked something, and post it. Put that on the website. It doesn't have to be an all out battle. And once you get into that flow, you'll find it a lot easier. And again, Richard, every PR person I know has a list of reporters that they would love nothing more than to, deliver a giant comeuppance.
Jim, my final question. I like asking people this. What do you think is the biggest challenge to comms and PR over the next few years?
Well, it's that journalism is becoming more ideological.
Do you think this is just journalism, though? Because like influencers now, isn't it? Is that journalism it's still important, but it's not as influential as it was.
Well, yes, but all of these narratives derive, especially in the business world, I think largely from the mainstream national press, print and broadcast. And until the narratives are established there, that's what drives policy, public opinion, fundraising toward the activism. It's a center of gravity. And it used to be, hewed toward objectivity and balance, and that was great. And those are important principles that journalism held up. And that has slowly eroded and become more and more ideological. And now you hear, as we mentioned earlier, there's so many journalists, reject objectivity as a virtue in and of itself. And that's a real problem because it means the coverage is slanted. It's hostile to business and free markets. And what's more, their business model is suffering. I would say as a result of becoming more ideological, they're losing readers, they're losing credibility, their business model is eroding, they're doing it to themselves. But guess what? There may be fewer lions out there on the savannah, but the ones that are left are hungrier, meaner, and more predatory. So that's where we're headed, I fear.
What about, I should have asked you about this, about influencers, because what can you actually do to correct influencers when you've got, instead of just one outlet that you can reach out to, now we're talking about potentially hundreds of people who have just immediately jumped onto some trend?
Well, I think Yeah, I mean, a key there, I think, is to flip the script and leverage their notoriety against them. So in the seafood space, we represent the trade association for all the leading seafood companies, national fisheries, and there was a spate of those stories, often ginned up by activists, in which famous celebrities would say, "Oh no, I ate too much tuna and I forgot my lines," or "I ate too much tuna and my doctor told me I shouldn't do it anymore." And so these celebrities would put this up there to, at the behest of activist groups often, to bash our industry. And so we would again lean into that. We would confront it and say, actress X was actually out late at night, if you look at the clips, and she didn't forget her lines. She was hungover. And no, the doctors don't say that. Here's what the American Medical Association says, celebutante Z. And so we would confront them in their own feeds. And we would buy their own name on social media to tag them in our digital ads. We would purchase their name on search and social and run ads against it. And so we would lean into it and grapple with it. So again, although they're popular, although they've got many fans, and although my guys are, the tuna industry, which is hard, not exactly the most, it's not warm and cuddly, but by conducting it that way with credibility, head on, and yes, a little bravery, the public had affinity for the tuna companies. We were able to, trump and eclipse even
To
the biggest.
question the narrative, to raise a question.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a question. It's about credibility, not simply fame or circulation. I mean, the New York Times has however many million readers, but they can't buy credibility. Even if a corporate blog has a Twitter feed, we have 1,000 followers. It's a contest of fundamental, credible affinity.
Jim, seriously, we could go on for hours. This is absolutely fascinating stuff, but we have got to wrap it up. We've got way over as it is. Just finally,
Okay.
is there a way that people can reach out to you or should reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, they can reach me at my, by email, jim@counterpointstrategies.com, and they can visit our website, although it's password protected for clients only, I'm afraid, Richard.
No worries.
But if clients are interested, they're free to reach out, and I've written a number of articles online that they can easily find about our viewpoint on this in different venues like National Review Magazine. I contribute to quite a lot.
Jim,
And of
it's
course,
been-
I've got a Twitter feed.
Do you want to give the...
JMA.
Go on, what's the username?
The username is JMACGTOWN, JMacGTown.
Wonderful. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. We must check in again because I'd love to hear more about this. There's so many different angles, and with the way society is changing, I think you're so on top of this stuff that it'd be fascinating to check in with you again.
Yeah, to be continued, Richard. I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
And that was Jim MacCarthy from Counterpoint Strategies, an absolutely fascinating 3-part interview with Jim. And I really do want to get him on again because, as I said at the beginning, even if you don't necessarily agree with the clients he's working with, I think it's so useful and interesting to hear different perspectives from the world of comms as to how to approach strategy. It's not just about sending a press release and hoping for the best with some fluffy story. And also, it's interesting as well. I talk about this at times on with the podcast, is that I'm interested in independent and the scrappier side of PR rather than the big agencies. And Jim has a very small team, and yet he's working for some of these major players with a small team, and he's punching way above his weight in terms of the numbers and impact that he is actually having. So I think there's a lot we can learn from there. As always, I'm always interested in what you're doing that is interesting and what is fascinating and stands out. And I would love to get you on as a guest as well, talk about some of the work that you are doing at the moment. You can reach me on LinkedIn. That's always the easiest way to get hold of me, frankly, is LinkedIn. If we haven't connected yet, then feel free to connect. My name is Richard Midson, Midson. Send me a message and we can start sorting something out. In the meantime, I hope you found this fascinating, and I'll speak to you real soon.